Hello, world. It's Mailbag Day. It's Friday. I'm Sean Stiers, and he is Trevor Trowbridge. I know that you usually tune in with rapt attention, waiting to see Brian Driscoll and ask Brian Driscoll all of his questions. But we're going deeper on the depth chart today because Brian, I think, as we speak, is in the air heading to Atlanta right now for Notre Dame, Georgia Tech.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much, USMA 87. I appreciate that. Good start. Good start. We're off to a great start. Yes. Father David says I'm on the wrong side of the screen and he can deal with that. So you're just going to have to deal with us. It is Mailbag Day. Nothing changes other than the faces you're looking at and the voices you hear. What, maybe a week and a half since you and I were together.
Yeah.
Trevor, how are you today?
Not too bad. It's Friday. It's game day eve. Ready to watch Notre Dame and Georgia Tech go at it, but can't complain. It's a beautiful day outside. It's not as cold as it has been down here, so not too upset. How you doing?
Same here. I'm doing good. A little bit chilly the last couple of mornings, but it just feels like football weather is what it is. So I saw we've already got a lot of offensive line questions stacked up here today. Nick, by the way, wants to know how to accidentally run into Brian at the game Saturday. Just circle Mercedes-Benz Stadium, I think would be the way to go. I don't know what time Brian will get there. Like when he even gets to home games kind of varies from game to game sometimes. So circle Mercedes-Benz and, just hold up your IB sign or wear your IB gear. That's the best way to do it. Just wear the IB stuff. Brian will be searching it out. So, well, you want to tackle some questions? What do you think?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's get into it. I love Friday mailbags.
USMA, where exactly do you live? I know like Brent Jones is one of our California listeners, and I know USMA 87 is in California. I didn't realize you were NorCal. I thought you were SoCal, but maybe everyone just assumes SoCal when you hear California. I don't know, but he says it's mid 50s in the morning in NorCal right now.
Not bad.
We'll see if USMA 87 lets us know where he is. You want to jump into this offensive line stuff?
Let's do it.
Like I said there. Now, remind me, because it's been a little while, we save the super chats for like their own thing later in the show. Is that how we do it? Or do we just pop them in whenever?
Super chats get bumped up to the top.
Okay, super chats at the top. All right. Well, that's different then. Let's just start off with Rob Osgood. I haven't looked at this question. Thank you for the super chat, Rob. How will the increase of scholarships affect Notre Dame, and what's their plan? Thank you so much. Love the boards. Great info. Sign up. And, of course, hit the like button as well. I forgot to mention that. We do appreciate it. So, the scholarships obviously are going to go from 85 to 105 next year, just kind of as a refresher course for everybody. And scholarships 86 through 105 can be partial scholarships. And we don't know how exactly Notre Dame is going to handle those extra 20 scholarships. There won't be any walk-ons, obviously. So what do you think about this, Trevor?
Yeah, I mean, Rob, thank you for the super chat. I think it's going to be interesting how Notre Dame handles it. I think it's just going to be more depth pieces that are added to the roster overall. I think that's going to be the impact that it has on Notre Dame. Brian and I actually talked about this on I think it was a buy-sell hold. But I think it will have more of an impact at some of the lower levels, like at the D2 level, the D3 level, because of just now they have the ability to go and get a partial scholarship at a bigger school, and that could impact that recruiting to some degree. But I think it will be a little bit of, Notre Dame will be able to add more depth pieces. I think a lot of people hear an increase of scholarship and they automatically think it's like, cool, now they can go out and get so many more 5-stars. I think recruiting at the top is going to remain the same. They will still have the same amount of targets, but it will allow them to go out and safely say, we can go out and get, like 2-3-star running back that has high upside, that is going to be a good team guy, things like that.
Yeah. I'm wondering, like when you look at a guy like Max Hurleman as an example, Ivy League guy, or I guess not Ivy League. Colgate's not Ivy League, right? Or is it? No, I stuck my foot in my mouth and I can't remember my leagues, but you know what I'm like that level of guy, like maybe some of these Ivy League guys who have played a little bit, who have an extra year of eligibility remaining, you kind of like plug those kind of guys in, potentially guys who can fill a role, like Hurleman obviously is a special teams guy, or some of those other, see, I knew that there was a C. Thank you very much, USMA. Cornell, yes. Colgate, no. So I didn't think Colgate was, but kind of along, the same lines. Private school, smaller school, smaller conference, that kind of thing. Again, like guys who have got some brains to them, who have shown they can, at least perform at that level, kind of at that FCS level. Maybe, like since you're not going to have walk-on type guys anymore, maybe you search a little bit more in the portal for those kind of guys.
Sure.
And at the very least, you give them a partial scholarship, something like that. I think it's going to be really interesting to see how they do go about it. It's something that I asked Marcus Freeman about early, I think still in training camp, kind of relatively soon after. And he basically just said, look, we'll adapt. Everyone's going to have to deal with it. We'll adapt. He wasn't very specific about it. I didn't think that he would be, but it's going to be different for everybody. And I think that maybe those kind of guys, you could start seeing more of them showing up on the Notre Dame roster, because there's at least some value in bringing in some of those kind of players who have some experience, who aren't necessarily, fully FBS type guys.
Sure, 100%.
All right, good question, Rob. Let's go. By the way, Modesto, USMA 87 says, Modesto, California, east of San Francisco, south of Sacramento. I don't think I've been to Modesto. I know my dad has been through there a lot because he used to drive a truck over the road, and he was always beating around in California. I've been through Stockton. I believe Modesto and Stockton aren't too far from each other. Stockton, where University of Pacific resides, so that's about the closest I think I've ever been to good old Modesto.
Good
California.
deal.
Yeah,
I've never been to California. So
really, okay. Well, you're still young. You've got time.
It's on the bucket list. On the bucket list. So.
Thanks for another super chat to Tyler. Which team cannot afford a second loss? Alabama, Georgia, or Tennessee? And which fan base will think the sky is falling if there is a second loss?
I think Alabama and Tennessee are going into an interesting game, because based on who wins, and Brian and I talked about this yesterday, and I'm pretty sure Brian and Bill Bender talked about this as well after the Keys to Victory show. But if Alabama wins and beats Tennessee in Knoxville, I think that they're poised to go on the run, right? Like, I think Alabama is going to start hitting their stride, and they're going to start, really hitting what people thought they were going to be at the start of the year. Defensively, they've been slacking. I mean, it's been tough. I mean, I have some of their numbers up. I mean, it's weird for an Alabama defense to be looked at like this, but they're ranked 41st in scoring defense, 62nd in passing defense, 55th in rush defense, and 54th in total defense allowed in a game, or total offense allowed in a game. So
yeah,
I think that's interesting. It's very uncharacteristic. I don't think they'll lose the fan base, because Alabama has a little bit more, like, Kalen DeBoer's going into his first year. I don't know.
I don't know, man. It felt like they were already, like, this is my sky is falling fan base. Personally, Alabama, because the sky was already falling when they lost that first game to Vanderbilt.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. And with Georgia,
because they're spoiled. I mean, look, it's been 17 years. They got 16 years of Nick Saban and all the national championships. And personally, I said this going in. If you look at Alabama history prior to Nick Saban, they they went through a lot of head coaches before they finally got to Nick Saban and reestablished themselves. That, I still think Kalen DeBoer is a good coach, but look, why did Nick Saban leave? It's a different world right now, and I don't think that it's going to stay Alabama just because it's Alabama. Kalen DeBoer's got to continue to prove it, and I think that there are already some cracks in the armor that we have seen in less than half a season from DeBoer so far.
Yeah, I agree. There's a lot that needs cleaned up. He's willing to get my benefit of the doubt because he is going into his first year as Alabama's head coach. With Georgia, I mean, who knows? I don't know if Georgia's ever going to lose their fan base. They have so many problems going on off the field right now and still have a very devout fan base, if I'm just being 100% honest.
Mm-hmm.
And if they go and they look back, they play number 1 Texas at Texas this week. I don't know if they lose the fan base after that loss. And then I think Tennessee could be that team of now you're starting to look at, well, they beat Alabama 2 years ago, in 2022, and that's now starting to look like the anomaly game. Haven't really started putting it together. It hasn't really looked great since then. So I think Tennessee, this loss would hurt them pretty bad in comparison to the 3.
I agree. And obviously they've got Alabama this week and they've got Georgia in a couple of weeks. That rivalry game with Tennessee to close out the season looks a lot more interesting, obviously, after what Alabama did. And that's my team as well in terms of the one that can least afford the second loss. Alabama and Georgia, I still think because of the name, I think that with a 12-team playoff, obviously, they might not end up even playing in the SEC championship game if they lose that second game, but I think that they can still potentially get in as one of the double-digit seeds because of who they are if they're able to win out the rest of the season, even if they take, I think that they can both absorb a second loss much more easily than Tennessee can.
Sure.
Tyler's got another one, and thank you very much once again. Last week, somebody told him to ask you this week who will win each Power 4 conference. So I'm sure Brian said that. I don't know if you said that.
It was me.
It was you? Okay. So
Yeah,
did you do your research? Did you come to play here? Are you ready to
Yeah.
hit him
Yeah.
with it?
So Tyler asked this question last week, and it was a good question, but with the big slate of games that were coming up, I just had no idea how to answer it because the Big Ten was wide open because on paper it was Ohio State because they had looked unstoppable and they had also played next to nobody. So I wanted to see how that game went, and that game definitely didn't disappoint. It was super exciting. I think Big Ten winners right now, I'm going to go with Oregon. I think their offense is just at a next level. For the Big 12 right now, I'm sticking with my answer from last week. I went with BYU, and right now they just look like the most complete team in that conference. So, but I will say I do think out of all of the conferences, I think the Big 12 is the most wide open. The ACC, I think until somebody can beat Miami, they have to be the favorite. There's a lot of people that think Clemson, but Clemson's best win is over a 3-4 NC State. And I think the only ranked team that they played in Georgia, they lost by 31. So ACC, I have Miami. And in the SEC, I'm sticking with my guns. I'm still saying Texas until proved differently. I do think Texas has holes, and I look at them similar to how I viewed Ohio State going into the Oregon game because Texas is unproven. I mean, yes, they had the win at the Big House against Michigan. Michigan is just not that good of a football team this year, to be 100% honest.
No,
so
I agree.
I'm for 4 conference winners to sum it up. I have Texas in the SEC. I have Oregon in the Big 10. I have BYU in the Big 12, and I have Miami in the ACC.
Now, when you're saying conference champions, are you including the conference championship game, or are you talking regular season?
Including the conference championship.
Okay,
game.
I'm just curious. Kind of a different. Like, I look at the Big 12 and it's amazing. Like, I'll never be completely sold on Iowa State, but like you look at their schedule, and this is part of the thing with these big expanded conferences is not everyone's going to play each other every year, so you have some disparity, especially like in the SEC and probably the Big Ten as well. But still, the Big 12 is part of that. Like Iowa State and BYU, neither one of them, they're both undefeated right now.
Yeah.
I'm not completely sold on either one, but they've both relatively got a pretty smooth path to finish the season undefeated. Iowa State, the end of the season, they close against Kansas State. That's it. BYU has already played against Kansas State and smoked Kansas State, but neither one of them otherwise plays any ranked teams the rest of the season. So you're most likely going to either see two undefeated teams or Iowa State with one loss going into the Big 12 championship game if they would lose to Kansas State to end the regular season. And then, does the in all likelihood, unless you have a 2-loss team coming out of like losing the Big 12 championship game, in all likelihood, you're going to have 2 bids for the Big 12, which I think would probably have surprised some people, especially if it ends up being Iowa State and BYU. That would have surprised a ton of people coming into the season.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think Oregon has got to be the team to beat now in the Big Ten as well. It was Ohio State coming into the season. For me, it was Ohio State even going into last week. That game went right down to the wire at Oregon. Obviously, I wouldn't be shocked if we see a repeat of that game in the Big Ten championship game. But
that's what I was going to say. I mean, Ohio State is still very much in the race.
Yeah.
To be Big Ten champion. So I don't want to count them out completely. The other team that a lot of people talk about is Penn State. And for me, I need to see a prove-it game from Penn State. They're the same team every single year. They'll go 6-0, 7-0, be ranked in the top 6, be ranked in the top 5, and then they'll lose to one of Michigan or Ohio State in 1 week, in like week 10, and then in like week 8 or 9, they'll lose to either Ohio State or Michigan, and then they're 10-2, they're out of the top 10, and then they're no longer in contention for the Big Ten. So that's Penn State's a prove-it team to me. I mean, I know they're like the 3rd ranked team in the country right now, but I got to see it. But that does become a must-win game for Ohio State, because if Ohio State drops a game to Penn State at Beaver Stadium, I think they're out of contention for the Big Ten championship game.
Yeah. I don't think they will, but your point too, if they do, I definitely agree with that. Ryan Roberts chimes in: Clemson, Ohio State, Iowa State, Georgia.
Okay.
We shall see.
Okay.
I mean, I can't completely disagree with that list. Again, in the Big 12, it's most likely either going to be Iowa State or BYU.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest, I haven't seen a full game of either one of them yet. But again, I haven't come away completely impressed with anything that I've seen of him so far. Brandon, yes, no Brian today. He it took a road game. Well, I guess neutral site game, but still away from South Bend to get Brian away from the Friday Mailbag show. Even the bosses have to travel, so Brian is traveling, flying as we speak, going to Atlanta, and so you're stuck with me as a result. And I'll have IB Countdown to Kickoff with Vince later on tonight as well. Sorry though, Brandon. He says it makes his question pointless. I can throw this up here and see if Ryan wants to take a shot at it.
I took a look at the question. I think I can take a stab at this.
You want to take a shot at it? Okay.
Yeah, why not?
So here's from Brandon. In your opinion, which Notre Dame cornerback will have the most successful or outstanding college career? Dallas Golden, Mark Zachary, or Leonard Moore?
I mean, it's tough to say. I mean,
you just said you were going to answer it.
I said I was going to take a stab at it.
That's tough. I don't know.
Right now, my leading candidate's going to be Leonard Moore. Dallas Golden has such a high ceiling, though. I think athletically, he's a freak, and I'm not going to be upset if any of them have a fantastic career. I will say this: at some point, we're going to come down to like which is the best of a really good cornerback room. That's how I evaluate this room. Right. So out of all of them right now, if I had to give my leading candidate, it's Leonard Moore because I have yet to see
Because we've
Dallas
actually
Goedert.
seen him play at the college level exceptionally well. Yeah.
Right. And Ben Morrison was quoted earlier this year by saying, like, I think Leonard Moore is going to be better than what I was. So,
yeah.
I mean, getting the nod from the best corner that Notre Dame has had in a very long time, I think that's got to be a sign of something. So as of right now, my answer's got to be Leonard Moore because he's the only one of these three that I've seen play at that collegiate level. So,
yeah, I just fall in. I think that the upside to all of this is you're just going to, like you said, Benjamin Morrison, the best cornerback that Notre Dame has had in a long time, but Christian Gray is working toward catching up with Benjamin Morrison. Leonard Moore is working on catching up with Christian Gray and Benjamin Morrison. The key is, just getting this cupboard stocked a little bit more so you don't have an unfortunate situation like you have right now. But just based on what I've seen of all of them, I think they're all going to be really good. That's the good news, especially as long as you can keep Mike Mickens around. And that's going to be the key, I think, to this whole thing. I mean, I do have to say, though, one, thank you, Brandon. Appreciate it. Two, from our former recruiting guy, recruiting is stupid. All right, then, Ryan. He's cleared the mechanism. He has cleared his brain since then. But that's because he can't handle the truth.
There we go.
Irish English.
There we go.
That's right. Another super chat. Who you guys got? IU, Nebraska, and Illinois scum. Who you picking?
I have Nebraska over IU, and I have Illinois over Michigan.
Ooh. I've got Nebraska over IU. I've got Michigan, though, beating Illinois. I went and kind of dug and looked at the numbers, and I didn't come away. Again, like I've seen Illinois a little bit this season. I've seen more of Michigan. Like who exactly is Michigan? I think is, it's a legit question. I don't know. I'm not convinced that Illinois is for real. Let's just put it that way, especially after they gave up 49 points to Purdue last week. I don't understand what that anomaly is all about, because I think they had given up like all of maybe 21, less than 30 points, I think, in their, in every other game they had combined before last week. And then they give up 49 and they win by 1 point against just a really bad Purdue team. So that's why I went with Michigan in this game.
Yeah, I mean, my prediction for the Michigan-Illinois game, it's going to be one of those classic Big Ten matchups where it's going to be very low scoring. There's going to be some really ugly parts of the offense. I think it's going to be a defensively led game. I mean, Michigan has the 102nd ranked scoring offense in all of football and the 132nd ranked passing offense. I think they're 39th in rushing. So, I mean, it's just Michigan as a team cannot push the ball down the field vertically. And from an identity standpoint, I think that's just who they have to be. They just have to accept that they're going to be a running first football team. Illinois, I'm kind of with you. Like they're an interesting team to me because they had a really good win over Nebraska. But since then, the Purdue game kind of made me a little uneasy about them. That one.
Exactly. Because it's not just you had a stinker game and you even gave up 3 touchdowns as opposed to, you gave up 49 points to Purdue, who looked like a couple weeks prior to that, like they were just willing to cash in the whole season.
Yeah, the week after they fired their offensive coordinator.
Exactly. I don't understand how it happened. So Coach Bent must have Googled Signetti. Do you remember that from his opening press conference? Like someone was asking him about why he was confident or whatever that he could turn around. He's like, Google me.
Yeah,
I don't know. I mean, it's tough to have buy-in with Nebraska because it doesn't matter who the head coach has been over the last few years. They've just always found ways to lose close games, and it's definitely like when you look at the two, if you're going to go Nebraska, Indiana, Nebraska still has the name behind them, so I don't know if maybe that kind of clouds my judgment a little bit. I do feel like Nebraska is a pretty good football team, and they have at least played a better schedule so far than Indiana's played. Like Indiana hasn't played anybody this year. And I'm not saying that I'm completely writing them off, but they haven't. They haven't played anybody this year. Nebraska is going to be the best team they've played. So that's why I'm going with Nebraska. I still think it'll be a fairly close competitive game, but I would go with Nebraska as well.
Is this game in Bloomington or is it in Lincoln?
I think it's in Bloomington.
Okay.
Let me check here. Somebody will probably know before I even find it. Yes, Bloomington.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be a good game. This is just by far. I mean, if you guys want some of the numbers, I broke some of them down yesterday. I mean, IU on paper is really solid. They have the second-ranked scoring offense in all of college football, the 10th-ranked passing offense. They have the 4th-ranked total offense. They have the 11th-ranked scoring defense. They have the 21st-ranked pass defense. So they're pretty solid. They have the 6th-ranked rush defense. So this is going to be a good game. IU is a good football team, but looking at those numbers with a little bit of context is they haven't played many people. I mean, the most impressive win that they have right now, probably the win over UCLA in the Rose Bowl, like when they went out to California. But now we see what kind of football team UCLA is. I will say in the games following, UCLA was significantly more competitive in those games than what they were against IU. And I think that's something that you can't take away from the Hoosiers. I'm not ready to write them home as legitimate Big Ten contenders or, anything like that until after the Nebraska game, because it's definitely going to be their biggest test.
And that's the thing. UCLA on the road at UCLA might be the best win that they've got.
Yeah, I mean, they're 3-0 in conference, and they've beaten Maryland, UCLA, Northwestern.
Correct.
But they have handled every one of those teams.
They have.
I'm
not trying to rip, I'm not trying to rip them. I'm not,
sure.
Whatever. I just think that Nebraska is a pretty good football team. The question is, like if this does come down to one possession, which every Nebraska game seems like it does, they actually beat Rutgers last week. And I think I picked Rutgers to win that game. Rutgers is a pretty good team, and they played within a touchdown of Illinois, and that Illinois is their only loss so far.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I do feel like this is a better Nebraska team. That I think for them, they just need to win a couple games to kind of feel like they can go out and do it.
Sure.
And again, they've only got one loss so far. Okay, so I'm thinking we can jump into some of this offensive line talk. What do you think? Because there's a lot of offensive line questions in here. Man, and Salty is mail bombing right now too. So thank you very much, Salty. MT41. Any chance next year's offensive line can look like this from left to right? Gerby Lambert, Charles Jagasaw, Ashton Craig, Billy Schrouth, Emil Wagner.
I don't think so. As awesome as that would be to say that this would be the starting offensive line, I don't look. If Gerby Lambert isn't getting a shot to start this year, there's no way that he's going to get a shot to start next year when Charles Jagasaw comes back. Because at the end of the day, if Charles Jagasaw was still healthy, he would be the bona fide left tackle. And so if Gerby Lambert isn't taking reps away from Anthony Knapp in practice, I don't think at the turn of the season he's going to start taking those reps away from Charles Jagasaw, who's going to be coming back off of injury. So I think from center to right tackle, I think looks like it would be the starting offensive line, pending on how Billy Schrouth comes back healthy. But I think Charles Jagasaw retakes the left tackle spot, left guard. Sam Pendleton isn't playing bad football right now. So that's going to be interesting to see. The one thing that I will say is Notre Dame is going to have champagne problems next year on the offensive line.
Yes.
They're going to have a lot of guys with experience, and the guys that don't have experience have one full season under their belt. So next year, there will be no excuse to not go out and put the 5 best guys out onto the field for sure.
And Ryan put it up in the chat before I could say it. I think if anything, if Lambert and Jagasaw are both playing, you would flip-flop those positions. I think Jagasaw is the left tackle and Gerby Lambert would be the left guard. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but I think if those two were both going to be playing, that's where it would end up. Because just based on what's going on right now, because you do still have the up and down from Anthony Knapp. If they thought that Lambert was a better option, he would already be out there playing left tackle right now. Now, what we've seen the last couple of years in training camp is whatever assumptions that we've had have just been thrown asunder because, like, surprise, surprise. Like, no one expected the offensive line. We ended up getting, throw Knapp and Jagasaw out of it, obviously, because of the injury at left tackle. But even the other, like, no one saw, like, the whole Pat Coogan Pendleton thing coming, So it just, I will not be surprised by anything that we see next year. Like you said, there's going to be a wealth of talent that they have, assuming everyone is back next year. I think that that's going to be the biggest question is, do they retain everybody in that room right now? Or because there is going to be both a winter and a spring transfer portal, do you see a guy or two head out and just say, look, it's too deep here. Maybe that's at the end of spring. I'm going to go someplace else and have a chance to start someplace else.
Yeah, some of it is going to be determined by how some of these players come back off of an injury too, right? Like Ashton Craig, going to be interested to see how he comes back after his knee injury. Billy Shrouth, I think it depends on how well he's able to come back this year and how effective he's going to be, because I think he's still just week to week now, isn't he? I don't know when he's.
Who's that? Shrouth?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know when it's been deemed that he's going to come back for sure.
He could literally, if he's not back by the Navy game, I would say there's probably a pretty good shot that they would get him back by Florida State, because you have the extra bye week in between. Because it's just sounded like, not that Freeman has come out and said, it sounded like he's getting closer anyway, sure, but he's just not quite there yet. So now Greg takes issue. He says, ridiculous take that if Lambert can't win the offensive tackle role now, he can't win it next season. Maybe Jagasaw is a much better left guard than Pendleton. Not convinced that Jagasaw has the foot speed for tackle. Okay, but he was going to be the starting left tackle if he hadn't been injured. And I'm not saying Lambert can't win the tackle next year. I'm just saying that when you throw Jagasaw into the mix, I'm saying, yeah, if you throw, when you throw Jagasaw back into the equation next year, I don't think that it happens. This is my opinion. I'm not saying it won't, but that's what I think right now, that it would not happen if Jagasaw is back in the mix next year, because he was going to be the guy.
Yeah, look, here's my thing, and I don't like hear practice reports. I don't know what's going on behind the scenes or anything, but here's the thing. Out of all three people that could possibly be playing left tackle for Notre Dame, between Anthony Knapp, Charles Jagasaw, and Gerby Lambert is the only one that hasn't seen meaningful minutes as a left tackle.
Correct.
So I understand that there's this, and look, I would be interested to see it too, because I when I look at Notre Dame's pass protection right now, it's hard for me to believe sometimes that this is the best that it could be. Like I'm with you on that aspect, right? But Anthony Knapp and Gerby Lambert were both true freshmen, and Anthony Knapp was elected for some reason. And whether it's because Gerby Lambert was not comfortable playing on the left side of the offensive line, I don't know. Whether it's because Anthony Knapp was more ready from a schematic standpoint, then I just don't think that it's. I don't think a guy like Gerby Lambert goes from not taking reps away from Anthony Knapp to taking away reps from Charles Jagasaw, who is the slotted left tackle to start this season.
Yeah.
I don't see that happening.
Salty, continuing with the Gerby Lambert offensive line. barring injury, is the next bye week Lambert's best chance at starting on the offensive line this season? Now, I want to go ahead and throw another one in there with it because I think, and again, not being there and not seeing kind of, who they're practicing where and all that kind of stuff. I want to throw this in there with it as well from MT41. Gerby only played right tackle in high school and has only played right tackle at Notre Dame. What are the chances he's not comfortable playing left-handed? So kind of combining those two things. What do you think about all that, Trevor?
I mean, potentially. I mean, I know there's talk in the chat going on right now too about how Anthony Knapp was there in the spring and Gerby Lambert wasn't. Excuse me. So all of those things combined, maybe. I mean, I think that's more of a valid argument if we're having this conversation in week 2 or week 3. But it's the same conversation with Riley Leonard. If the argument can't be used that like Riley Leonard can't be excused anymore for like not participating in the spring, then I think the same holds true for other positions on the team. Like if this was a week 2, week 3 conversation of like, why isn't Gerby Lambert ready to take over the spot from Anthony Knapp? Well, he wasn't here in the spring and like the development wasn't there. But now, I mean, you are halfway through the season, So
yeah.
And to answer the first question, I think it was from Salty. I think that there is an ongoing evaluation from this past bye week to the one that's coming up after the Navy game of if the left side of the offensive line, if their pass pro is going to be enough to make a push to run the table the rest of the season and make a push to have a run in the playoffs, right? Like I think that is one of the things that this offensive coaching staff is evaluating. I don't see them pulling out Anthony Knapp. I don't. So unfortunately, like I'm not saying that I think the pass pro on the left side of the offensive line is perfect right now, but I think from a chemistry standpoint, I think they don't want to mix up the starting rotation any more than what it already has naturally with injuries.
Yeah, and I mean, so a couple of different things. Again, I combine two things, so you got to kind of separate them a little bit. Mike Denbrock did say last week that during the bye week, they definitely gave guys who had played a lot a rest, and the guys who have played the most on the offensive line are the two tackles, Knapp and Wagner. So they got some rest, and guys who were lower on the depth chart got more reps. They got more looks to see what they could do, and they didn't make any changes after that. Like Knapp is still the left tackle, and Wagner, obviously expectedly is still the right tackle. As far as the right hand, left hand, I think that there could be something to that because I think that's predominantly the reason Emil Wagner has been the right tackle all along, is because his comfort level is just that much better on the right side. So maybe that's it, because it is different when you're dropping that left foot as opposed to the right foot, and just the way that you've got to move. There is some difference going from one to the other. In some guys, it just takes a lot longer. And if with Gerby, with that right side being the experience that he has, I could see where maybe, especially when you're transitioning against much better competition, that could be an issue for him right now.
Yeah, I mean, playing as a left-handed dominant player is tough. Like if that's something that you're not comfortable with, I mean, then you have your answer right there. I mean, not all players. Just a lot of people think, well, you can play offensive tackle. They look at that as just a blanket, like you can play either side, and it's different. It is.
Yep. I was about to look for something. I saw something in the chat. I'm going to look for something here in just a second after I get this down. Yeah. And more offensive line from Salty. Who's been the best of the new offensive line players, Pendleton or Knapp?
I mean, I think it's Sam Pendleton. I do, because it's Anthony Knapp is actually, he's a really solid run blocker. He is. Like in the running game, he's great. I think the issue with Anthony Knapp is I think he's just playing out of position. I just don't think he's a natural tackle. He's
not a natural tackle, and I don't think that he's strong, but I just don't think he's just not big enough to adequately play out there.
Yeah, he's not great at blocking in space. Like that's just, I mean, he gets beat a lot when he's out in space. So, but I think just when I look at it, I think Anthony Knapp's run game is up here, and I think his pass pro is down here with Sam Pendleton. I think he also has really good run game. or run blocking. And against Stanford, he graded out as either the highest or the second highest on Pro Football Focus for pass blocking grade. So I'm giving it to Pendleton.
I give it to Pendleton as well. A little bit bigger news for this weekend, and I just saw Irish Gordian Knott and some others talking about this in the chat, and this is what I was looking for. Pete Thamel from ESPN just tweeted about less than 15 minutes ago that Georgia Tech is going to be without their quarterback Haynes King against Notre Dame tomorrow. He had been day-to-day, so no Haynes King, according to Pete Thamel. It'll be Zack Pyron, the much less experienced backup quarterback in terms of style of play. They are both, dual threat running quarterbacks, but I think it's like 30-plus games that Haynes King has played in, and whereas I know Pyron has one or two starts along the way. He started a couple of years ago, I believe, against Virginia Tech, but he otherwise, most of the games that he has played in, it's been like either mop-up time or Tyler Buckner type package.
Yeah, they will. I was just about to say they will bring him in on short down and distance situations because he is a big body to run. He reminds me a lot of like what Taysom Hill is for the Saints, because Brent Keyes, the head coach for Georgia Tech, came out and said, he was on like a radio show and he was like, we have to find a way to get Pyron on the field. He was like, we've looked at special teams packages to get him in, but we just need to put an emphasis on putting the best 11 guys out onto the field. So Haynes King isn't good to go, which is tough because I think he's a dynamic playmaker. And I definitely think that hurts Georgia Tech's chances because I don't see them being able to move the ball as effectively without Haynes King. But Zack Pyron is still an athletic player. He does get meaningful snaps. He scored a touchdown in the Florida State game on the goal line. So he will come in and contribute. But from a passing standpoint, I think Haynes King is superior.
Yeah, Raymond said pylon, and then he said, damn, autocorrect. Pyron, yeah, every time I've tried to type his name, like when I've written something about him, my autocorrect changes it to Byron instead of Pyron. And so I have to go back and make sure that I'm not calling him Byron instead of Pyron, which autocorrect wants me to do. Yeah, I think the lack of experience, though, is going to be really big. Yeah. In terms of going up against Al Golden's defense. I think that is going to be a massive challenge for a guy like Zack Pyron, who has not played very much. And I think it obviously is good news for Notre Dame. It might have been fun to see both Haynes King and Riley Leonard, two of the top dual threat quarterbacks in the whole country, going head to head out there. I still think, Pyron will make some plays here or there. I think it's just going to be, especially from the passing game situation, it's going to be a lot tougher for him to be able to make any, plays that are of any substance that really threaten Notre Dame for most of the afternoon.
Sure.
Just got another super chat slide in from Craig. We appreciate that. With the shortage at cornerback, would Notre Dame consider a wide receiver to go to corner for depth purposes?
Yeah, Craig, thank you for the super chat. I don't know if they would, because I don't know what receiver on their team right now would move over to that side of the ball. If I'm just being 100% honest, maybe for depth purposes. I think if an additional corner goes down potentially, but I think their focus right now is going to be developing Carson Hobbs to get ready to rotate in, because he has been working as a corner all year. I think that they would elect to do that, or getting Jordan Clark more reps at the true corner position, not just the nickel. I think they would elect to do that over trying to teach a wide receiver midway through the season how to play corner. That's right. Just my take on it.
Right. And yeah, I mean, and I think that's the biggest thing right now is, like just what they've got on the depth chart. I just don't think that there are a lot of guys who make immediate sense to be able to do it. Maybe you could, like, hey, maybe they're just like Troy Brown situation back in the Patriots days when he was playing. He was a pretty good wide receiver for Tom Brady, and they were pretty thin at at corner, so he flipped over, and you had old number 80 out there defending passes as well as trying to catch him. I think that this is one, especially depending on how this weekend goes, that maybe Marcus Freeman might see this question asked. Do you need, especially with the bye coming up, do you maybe tinker with something like that? So I would say TBD. I agree with you that it's most likely not going to happen, but at the same time, you kind of need to be looking at some options, I think, just because you've still got half a season to go, and with the rash of injuries that they've had so far, I don't think that you can necessarily, be completely confident that it's not going to happen to somebody else.
Yeah, I think there's different options that they will look at on defense first before they go to switching a wide receiver. If I'm being 100% honest, I mean, look to get Rod Hurd more involved in the defense because he's another defensive back. Looking to getting Luke Talek into the game more. I'm not saying as a corner, but to free up maybe like if they bring in a Luke Talek and then they move a Jordan Clark or a Rod Hurd to more of a nickel situation potentially. I mean, find different ways to get oh gosh, I'm blanking on his name. I know his number 25. We were talking about him yesterday. One of the linebackers that isn't rotating in right now. Went to high school with Blake Hebert. Oh my goodness. I remember every detail about this kid except for his name.
Zinter? Is that who you're thinking
Preston
of?
Zinter.
Yeah.
Like look into getting situations in where Preston Zinter comes in at linebacker and Jaden Osbury with his speed plays more of a nickel role, kind of like what, I think there's a lot of different strings that they could start pulling on defense before they take a wide receiver out of that room and put it, because on the flip side, the wide receiver room hasn't been crazy productive this year either. And so I don't know if they would take, I saw, somebody in the chat put like KK Smith could play corner. It's like, well, I mean, he outside of Chris Mitchell is like one of your best deep threats. I don't know if they take that out of the wide receiver room to put him in the corner.
And I think that, again, like Hurd is not he wouldn't be option one, but just what they've got. Jordan Clark has already shown that he can play outside. And then, that would mean potentially more Hurd playing nickel in that circumstance. And so if you needed it, like I think the next option would be Hurd playing outside. Maybe he, like cross trains there. And then someone like you're talking about, Luke Talek, or, whoever it happens to be. Someone mentioned Max Hurleman. I think that, like that could potentially be an option as well. Those kind of guys. Again, like I agree. I don't see a wide receiver necessarily, being cross-trained there, but I could see that someone else from another position, like other defensive back positions on defense, kind of moving those pieces around and at least, for depth, getting them more reps and kind of get the looks and see what they can do. And it would not be a perfect situation, obviously, if it comes to that, and you don't want it to come to that. But I would also have a ton of confidence that if anyone can get a guy coached up and playing out there, it would be Mike Mickens. So I would have a lot of confidence in that.
Agreed, 100%.
So we were just talking about the fact that Haynes King is going to be out tomorrow, and Steven saying Haynes King is out. Do you think Georgia Tech will simplify the offense, and does that help Notre Dame schematically?
Potentially. I don't know how many downfield shots are going to take. I mean, Eric Singleton and Malik Rutherford are still really good wide receivers, and they are guys that can still take the top off of a defense. I don't think we're going to watch Georgia Tech just kind of go into this shell and just run the football 58 times. I don't think it'll be that necessarily, because naturally as an offense, Georgia Tech on offense still does things that Notre Dame's defense has had trouble with historically. They still run pre-snap motion a lot. They do a really good job of getting their running backs involved in the game in multiple different ways. And Zack Pyron is still a mobile quarterback. So I do think to some degree it will affect it. But again, I don't think that they're going to go into this turtle shell offense and just run the ball 58, 60 times and just like hope for the best and hope that they can break one. Excuse me. But I do think it will help out Notre Dame schematically, especially with the injuries that they have on defense. Going to be a huge game we talked about it in Keys to Victory. If Haynes King was elected to not go and Zack Pyron was the quarterback that was going to play, having pressure up the middle is one thing that will quickly make a backup quarterback extremely uncomfortable, because there will be situations where Georgia Tech's offense will have to pass and push the ball down the field.
Oh, absolutely. 100%. Absolutely. And that was huge in terms of the fact that Notre Dame was finally able to start getting some of that pressure up the middle last week against Stanford. Now, Georgia Tech's offensive line is better than Stanford's offensive line. So Notre Dame is, Howard Cross and Riley Mills and Gabe Rubio are going to have to show that they can go out and do it again. And remember, you won't have Jason Onye either for this game. But like getting Rubio back, I still think that kind of like some of the way that Rubio plays, maybe that rubbed off on Howard Cross and Riley Mills a little bit and kind of got them stirred up a little bit last week, because they definitely played those two played their best games of the season. Again, Stanford's offensive line was not very good, but just what you mentioned right there, if they can continue to get some pressure up the middle, that combined with how the defensive ends, they did a really good job of contain and setting the edge last week, doing exactly what you needed to do for the most part against a dual threat quarterback, not running past the quarterback, playing to his outside shoulder, keeping him in the pocket, and then that pocket collapsed when they were able to get that pressure up the middle. You throw and that was against an experienced quarterback last week, Ashton Daniels. You throw all that against an inexperienced quarterback, and that potentially sets itself up to be a really good day for Notre Dame tomorrow.
Yeah, 100%. This is poised to be a really good game for the defensive line. Josh Burnham is really good at stopping the run. That's where he plays the best on the edge, and we saw what he did last week against an option pitch, picks it out of the sky and runs it back for a 19-yard return. So there's going to be – this is a really good opportunity. Now it's been heightened with Haynes King being out. This is a really good opportunity for the defensive line to kind of step up, stake their claim, and say, hey, little rough start to the year. We're here now. It's time to go.
Yes. I mean, to me, like this could – I'm not saying it's going to, but – things work out the way I think there's a really good chance it gets really ugly for Georgia Tech. Again, I know this guy has played a little bit, but this is going to be the best defense that he has faced, the most complicated defense that he has faced, especially for a young quarterback to try to diagnose and, make his reads on the move. And, again, if Notre Dame is able to get some pressure on him, it could really make for a really long day for him and a lot of smiles for Notre Dame, I think.
100%.
Irish English, for the sake of conversation, Riley Leonard's passing yardage number is set at 175 yards. Doesn't that seem really low? I was looking at the props for this game this morning, and I was a little surprised.
Yeah, I mean, in the grand scheme of like college football passing numbers, is that low? Yes. For Riley Leonard, is it
but
low?
For Riley Leonard,
no. I mean, as tough of a conversation as that is, I mean, he's had one game over 200 yards. So now I do think when you take into consideration what the holes are on Georgia Tech's defense, and the passing game is taking the necessary steps, albeit they're smaller steps than what I would personally like to see, but steps forward nonetheless. I think 175 is too low for this game specifically, because I just think that this is going to be a 4-quarter game. It'll be interesting now with Haynes King out, like we just got done talking about, but Georgia Tech is a better team than Stanford. Let's just call a spade here. I don't see Riley Leonard just not playing the entire fourth quarter.
I mean, they are, but their pass efficiency defense is not that much better than Stanford's.
Oh, I agree.
They're 105 in pass efficiency defense, which, like, you look at, defensive metrics and all that kind of stuff. I mean, like when you look at predictors of success, it should at the very least give Riley Leonard a chance to be right around 200. So I honestly, I agree with what you're saying. Like when you look at what Riley Leonard has done this season, 175 yards probably makes sense. I agree. Georgia Tech is better. Again, their pass efficiency defense nominally better than Stanford's last week. So I probably would have set, if it were me, I would have set the number at the very least closer to 190 yards, if not even 200 yards for this game. But if you want to get some money on it, 175 is probably the best way to go. So maybe that's,
I'd take I'd take the over.
That's right, because Vegas is sitting here going, we're going to put this at 175. We're going to sucker all these Notre Dame fans into betting the over, so.
I'm going to take the over on Saturday, and Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price are going to combine for 250 rushing yards.
Right, and that's how, you can't – it's been very hard to predict anything coming from Notre Dame's offense.
Yeah.
Another Riley Leonard question from Salty. Is Riley's "they've been open all season, I just haven't thrown it to them" comment the best from an Irish quarterback over the last decade?
It's got to be up there. It's got to be up there. I mean, it's real. That's a real thing to say. So, and I think that's a sign of a quarterback taking ownership and leadership over, whether it's press conference speak or not. I think that's very real. So I appreciated it.
I mean, I can't think of any specific quotes over the last decade. The last decade gets us back to 2014. Most of the stuff coming from Deshaun Kaiser were probably in the whole controversy after he declared for the draft. And then Brian Kelly said he should have stayed, and, those kind of things. Again, I can't remember specifics. And then, of course, like the media day when Kaiser and Zaire at the beginning of 2016 were named the co-starters. I'm sure that maybe there's something that came out of there that, might have kind of lit things up a little bit. But at least the ones I can remember, I mean, this is it. And, again, like I love how honest he was and the fact that he was able to joke about it a little bit. And, kind of obviously knowing that he's been watching a little bit of game film and he knows and he's learned from it. So, piggybacking, will Riley continue to refer to Sean as the dude? I don't know if it was the dude, but he did drop a dude or two when I asked him that question after the Louisville game. So, I don't know. We'll see. TBD. Ghost X, when we look at the team in a macro perspective and take the season as a whole, assuming Notre Dame makes the playoffs with the injuries, is that enough for the fan base, or is a win necessary?
I would love to think. I honestly no, because the expectation is if you make the playoffs, it's to win a game, especially with the expanded playoffs, because there's a really good chance that if Notre Dame wins out, like we've been talking about the last couple of weeks, that Notre Dame, if they win out, will be a seed where they host a home game. I think the expectation is if you miss, or is if you make the playoffs, it's you win a game in the playoffs. So that's just a mentality thing personally for me. Excuse me, because I don't think the goal is, and I don't think the conversation around it is going to be, all right, guys, we just got to get to the playoffs, and then we're good. I mean, think of the years that Notre Dame made it to the playoffs and then got waxed in the first round. Mm-hmm. It was never enough then, especially when you compound the Northern Illinois loss. Like, I think everything, I agree with the sentiment, or like with the injuries, absolutely. Like, there's a reason why Marcus Freeman was named to the Coach of the Year award watch list. And it's because of all the injuries that have happened, and they are now going on a 4-game, potentially 5-game winning streak now and putting themselves in a position where they can make the playoffs without their 2 best edge rushers, their starting center, their starting right guard, lost their starting left tackle to start the year, and now they're out their best corner. So, I think that it would, I don't know about be enough, but I think given the injuries, I think that it's better than, I guess, like if not they had those injuries. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like if everybody was still healthy and you just make the playoffs, but like you lose in the first round, I don't think that that's,
Yeah, I mean, look, if you lose that first round playoff game, obviously no one's going to be happy about that. It's like, oh, we've got an expanded playoff and we still lose first round game and all that. I mean, I think part of the expectation with an expanded playoff is you should be able to win that first round game, because you're not going up against one of the top 4 seeds, in that first round game like you used to. And part of this, though, what's that?
I was going to say, and there's a chance you're playing at home. So
right. And that's kind of what I was going to get to next, is the fact that what is your seed going to be? Because if you're hosting, that means that you're the higher seed, and by definition, you're expected to win. But if you end up being seeded, what would that be? 12 through 9, then you're going to be on the road and you're the lower seeded team, So I think that should weight into there as well. But in terms of fans, I mean, everyone's going to expect a win. It doesn't matter where, and injuries aren't going to matter or any of that, kind of stuff. But I mean, I get where he's coming from, no matter what happens at the end of the season, if they get to the playoffs and you go, look at all these guys who were injured over the course of the season, you should be able to have the perspective that it still was a good, positive, growing season despite all these injuries that you had to overcome. Yeah. And then when you think about everybody coming back next year, you've got that much more reason for optimism going into next year.
Sure, 100%.
Wanted to get to some of these. I just realized some of these others came in earlier. We haven't got to them yet. From Hulk Strongest. What would be scarier, having Manti Te'o and Jalen Smith or Harrison and Watts together on this defense?
It's a good question. What do you think? I'll let you answer this one first because I got to think.
I'm thinking about this right now.
I think I'm going to err on the side of Te'o and Jalen Smith because as much as I would love to watch Harrison Smith and Xavier Watts play together, I think Adon Schuler's played really well. I don't know if he played as well as Harrison Smith would have, but Jalen Smith and Manti on this team would be, with that rotation of linebackers, I don't think Notre Dame would have as many of the running game issues as they would if Manti Te'o was in there. Now, not to take away from what this really young linebacking core has done and progressed over so far this season, but I mean, if you would ask me if I would put 2012 Manti Te'o on this team, I absolutely would.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm thinking, like the fact that Jalen Smith was basically the eraser, and having Jalen Smith and all the versatility and all that athleticism that he brings you and just the space that he can cover, he would wipe out a lot of things. And Manti obviously was a little more limited than Jalen athletically, but as a pure middle linebacker, look at what was it, 7 interceptions that he ended up with that during his Heisman runner-up season in 2012. Man, like, and again, like, especially with the college game, he could still cover some decent ground in the college game laterally. So I would have to go with those two as well.
I will say, with the game the way that it is now, if you gave me Jalen Smith at will and JOK at Rover and kept rotating Drake Bowen and Kingston Viliamasa,
wow,
I think I would take that over any of the options. But
yes,
that's just me.
Yep. Christopher Galloway. Yes, he was the thumper. And that's what he would bring, and he would just be, again, because you've got a guy like Smith with all the ground that he can cover. And then, you just throw whoever else is going to be over there, whether it's Osbury or whoever playing Rover. And like, you would just allow Manti to tee it up and go.
Yeah.
And he was also underrated, just like in terms of his ability to, like, especially that 2012 season, his ability to diagnose like screen passes and get there quickly and do some of that kind of stuff. So,
oh yeah, I mean, Manti in 2012 he had 7 picks in that season. So I mean, he obviously was effective in the pass game, but I think just the way the game is now, it's a little. It'd be interesting to see how he would fit in now.
Yes.
Don't think it would be bad by any means.
No,
of course not.
From what's that? Oregon?
Think so.
I'm bad at reading decoded handles. These next few games are huge for Marcus Freeman. When we win out, how do you think the perception of Marcus Freeman will change?
Pending Notre Dame wins out all of their games, I think it's going to put a lot of the narratives to rest about him, is that he can't consistently get his team prepared and he can't constantly get them ready and prepare them for week in and week out games. So I think a lot of those narratives will be put to rest. I really do. Because the biggest thing for me with Marcus Freeman has been inconsistency.
Yep.
I mean, he has 9 ranked or Yeah, through 2.5 seasons, I think he has 9 ranked wins
That sounds
right
right.
now. And if you just look at that stat, man, Notre Dame fans must love Marcus Freeman. It's like, well, look at it on the flip side of the coin. You have losses at home to a 2022 Stanford team, and you have a loss at home to a Northern Illinois team, and you have all of these games that have just been. I mean, you have the Marshall game, right? So those kind of stalled what I think the perception of Marcus Freeman is. But given the injuries this year, if Notre Dame goes on and wins out and they make the playoffs and get a win in the playoffs, I think a lot of those narratives will get put to rest. What say you?
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And that continues to be the biggest thing. What's this team week to week against opponent, whatever the opponent happens to be. And this is just our next chance to kind of check one off potentially and see if it comes to fruition. And then you've got a good Navy team coming up next week. I don't think they're going to be overlooking them, but if they do win out, then at least for now, at least for this season, you put all of that to rest. But let's just be honest. If you look at this big picture, as soon as we go into next season, it's going to be a question again, because you did have Northern Illinois this year, so you'll put it to rest for the short term, but long term, it's still going to be out there because you still have to prove that you can get through the next season on a consistent basis. It just hasn't been able to do that so far.
And you could honestly stake that claim for the majority of coaches. Like once the season ends, it's clean slate for everybody, right? So
well, and look, it looked like he had put that to rest last year because the losses were to good teams and they smoked the bad teams. But then you turn around and it popped its head up again this year.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, last year outside of the Clemson game last year, I would say like the losses I could kind of cope with. I think the loss last year to Clemson, they were down 8 starters, and it was like that was just a rough, an ugly outing, to be honest. But
yeah,
no, I agree. I mean, I think it's a clean slate for most coaches every single year, and it's just the expectation at Notre Dame will always be to put yourself in contention for a national championship. So really anything short of putting yourself in that position. I'm not saying necessarily you go and you play for the national title game, but putting yourself in a spot where you can. And next year, the evaluation is going to be, you can't be putting that in question again that early, like with a loss to a Northern Illinois, or 2022 with a loss at home to,
correct.
So it's can't be, that narrative needs to be put to rest.
I mean, I know Vince and I have kind of talked about this. You're almost better off just at the very least playing a mid to lower tier, Power 4 team as opposed to these MAC teams.
Oh yeah, I mean,
just for your team's psyche, I think.
Well, I mean, team psyche and what the stats show us. Notre Dame against Power 4 opponents averages over 40 points a game. Against the 2 MAC schools they played, they averaged 21.
There you go.
I mean, yeah.
I mean, and they've obviously even going back to the BK era, Ball State in Toledo, even like they struggled against putting those teams away.
Mm-hmm.
There've been very few exceptions. Central Michigan, obviously, being one of them. Beezer 12 washing beard. Josh Heupel or Kalen DeBoer? Who you want to coach your team?
Kalen DeBoer. I don't have to put a lot of thought into that one. I love Kalen DeBoer. What he did at Washington was fantastic. I mean, they were a 4-8 football team before he took over, and then they won like 26 out of like 30 games. Like in that time span, there was no like lag time of, all right, well, like let's wait for it to build up and let him get his recruits in here. I mean, they literally went from a 4-8 football team to a 12-1 or 11-2 football team. Yeah. And then played for the national championship in his second year.
I don't disagree with how impressive Kalen DeBoer has been so far. I actually like Josh Heupel a little bit more. I like his offensive mind, the fact that he was able to have the success that he had at UCF. I mean, UCF, what has UCF been, since he left for Tennessee? And Tennessee has essentially been resurrected under Josh Heupel. They hadn't been relevant in a couple of decades, basically, since, a little bit after Phil Fulmer won their national championship. They tapered off a little bit every year. They're back. I like the way he recruits. He's got a great offensive mind. So I would go with Heupel for my guy. Not saying DeBoer's a bad coach, but I do think that Joe says I'm trying to be contrarian. I don't mean it. Come on. Joe is Mr. Contrarian. I don't know if you mean it half the time. DJ, in today's landscape, do you see power broker teams having depth issues in the future? I think this is an interesting question.
I'll let you take this one first.
Well, I would say I kind of tend to agree with this because I think we're starting to see, like between the transfer portal and NIL, that plays into what DJ is talking about here. We're starting to see the talent. We're not at a point where there's true parity in college football, but we're starting to see it spread out a little bit more. And you are seeing cracks in the armor of a team like if you just look at a couple specific matchups, like Vanderbilt, Alabama, look what Clark Lee, Clark Lee was coming into a prove-it season. He had to have a good season this year, even as an alum of Vanderbilt. So he went out, invested heavily in the transfer portal, and, he's still got half a season to go, but at least for right now, he's got that signature win, and the transfer portal / NIL really changed it there. But you're also seeing, what that does. It is starting to pull some of this talent away from places like Alabama and Georgia and, like those kind of places. So I think that it is spreading the talent out a little bit more. So I think that, yeah, you could see him have some depth issues in the future because of that.
Yeah, I think it's causing teams to be extremely top heavy. I mean, look at Florida State. It works out in different ways, right? Like you have a team like Florida State that basically built their offense off of transfers.
Yeah, there you go.
And they had no depth behind it to back it. And like you're not going to convince me that, they have better recruits in waiting, but they just refuse to play them. Like, you know what I mean? So I think that the biggest thing with those power broker teams is there needs to be a shift in their mindset with how they construct their football teams. It can't be it can't be an or, if that makes sense. It can't be, well, we're either going to build our team through recruiting or we're going to build it through the transfer portal. It has to be both.
Right.
Like look at Notre Dame. They have added over the last couple seasons some necessary transfer portal pickups. Javonte Jean-Baptiste and Thomas Harper last year were fantastic last year, right, on defense. And they played a crucial part in Notre Dame's defense being as successful as it was. But when you go and you highlight the players that had the bigger seasons for Notre Dame, it's Ben Morrison, it's Xavier Watts, it's the 2 defensive tackles, and those are all recruits. So to me, it's an and. But yeah, to that mailbag submission, I agree. I think power broker teams are going to struggle with depth because they become extremely top heavy.
Right, and I mean Notre Dame has hit it with the way they're addressing the transfer portal and bringing players in. They're still building the vast majority of their roster through recruiting, and they've done a really good job with that. But they are augmenting from year to year specific needs by going out and using the transfer portal. And I don't think that's going to change. Now, who the positions are obviously going to vary from year to year. Sure. Like they don't need to go out and bring in another quarterback next year, for example. But they're like, I would think that just like they've done the last couple of years, they're going to have to go out and find a couple defensive backs who can come in and help them out.
Yeah,
next year.
I agree.
Salty wants to know how many Florida State players will hit the portal in December's transfer window.
I mean,
who depends on who's got eligibility left.
I was just about to say,
because of all the guys they brought in already.
We'll give the conservative answer and we'll say a good amount.
Yes,
we'll say that.
I don't doubt it. So, Tristan, after 6 games, would you want to go back to white monograms on home jerseys? I gave the gold the side eye earlier, but I would not go back. What do you think about this? The gold,
I love
Interlocking ND. Some say monogram. Some say interlocking ND on the shoulders, on the sides.
I like it. I like the gold on the side of the jerseys. I do like it. So I think it gives it a nice little, I don't know, like flare of color, little flash of gold. So I'm a fan of it. What say you?
I'm a little bit torn. I will say, like when I've seen, like looking at them kind of more from a distance, I don't think they look that great. But when I've seen them on TV, it actually looks pretty good. You know, like when it's a little bit more close up, I guess just because it's easier to see when the camera's zoomed in and all that stuff. So I'm really not that swayed one way or another. I can take or leave either. I think it would actually look a little bit better. It would pop a little bit more, like with a white outline around the gold ND. I would say that, but otherwise, I'm good either way. I think that either one looks pretty good. Should a play be designed in which Coogan is pass eligible?
I love the thought, Salty. I really do. But if you want my answer, I want to see Jaden Greathouse in a game have more than one target before we start designing plays for Pat Coogan. That's just me.
Yes, and I think Salty would probably agree with that. You know, like if you can have your choice between Jaden Greathouse being targeted more and drawing something up specifically for Pat Coogan, I think that you would take the former before the latter.
Yeah,
I agree with that. Salty has another one. Given his continuing improvement, will Anthony Knapp remain at left tackle for the remainder of the season?
I think he will. In the run game, he's steadily improving. It was weird because he improved against Louisville, and then he had a rough showing against Stanford.
Yeah,
so
step back against Stanford.
He's very this. Sorry, Anthony Knapp is very up and down.
Yes, riding the waves.
And so I think that they're going to keep him there just for continuity on the offensive line. I really do, because this is now the fourth game that this offensive line is going to be together after Ashton Craig and Billy Strouth have gotten hurt. So I just don't think that they're going to make a switch. Ideally, he continues to improve in the passing game, and it's not so much this. But I don't know. There have been no signs for me that show that this team is going to pull him from left tackle, even if he stays at this exact same level right now. So that's my thought.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think if a change is going to be made, quite honestly, because you do have the second bye week coming up, depending on how they use that bye week, you know, like if they give some guys longer looks again and that kind of thing. I think that, you know, we're going into game 7 now. And I think that the odds are at this point in the season, there's a strong chance that he just stays out there because, you know, again, now that's not to say that a guy like Gerby Lambert, for example, hasn't improved since the start of the season.
Sure.
There have been a lot of people calling for Tosh Baker. And of course, the irony of that is after Charles Jagasaw went down in training camp, there were so many people who were just freaked out at the thought of Tosh Baker starting out there at left tackle. And then that obviously changed a couple of weeks later when Knapp took it over. It ended up being the guy. But many of those same people, or at least it seems like it, would like to see Baker back out there again.
Yeah.
You know? And, you know, without being able to see them, I don't know why, you know, there's just so many people who make that assumption. Well, this guy is so bad, the next guy's got to be better. Well, no, because the starter would not be out there on the field if he hadn't shown that he was better than the number 2 to begin with. So, you know, like from a coaching standpoint, they know what they're getting. And I just, you know, I feel like if we don't see a change right after bye week number 2, we're not going to see a change. So I know that doesn't make a lot of people happy, but I feel like that's where it is.
I think that if they were going to make a change, it would have happened prior to right now.
Correct.
I do. Barring an injury or just an absolute collapse of play on the left side of the offensive line that they will evaluate at this upcoming bye week, I think if the change was going to be made, they would have made it already.
Agree. Nick, Notre Dame should switch to white pants for all uniform combos moving forward. What do you think?
Not all. I like the white on white. Like I think the icy whites look really good for away. But call me a traditionalist. I'm a sucker for gold pants for Notre Dame. Like I think it looks good. I wouldn't mind a different shade of gold for the pants because like they're starting to borderline be like kind of yellow.
Mm-hmm.
I really like the gold from like the Brady Quinn era, Jimmy Clausen era color of gold pants. I really like those. But I don't know. I do like the white and green combo that they had for the Louisville game. I love
really
that.
sharp.
You saw all of like the recruits. That's the uniform combo that they choose when they come and take like the recruiting picture visits. And then I like the all white pants for away games too. But for everyone, I think if you just went navy blue and white pants for just home games, I think it just wouldn't look like Notre Dame that much. I think the gold pants are kind of a key point.
Yeah, I don't mind it as an alternate one-off once a year type thing.
Yeah.
With the green pants, it made perfect sense and it looked great. It was a really crisp, clean look with the gold jerseys. I think you could do it once with the blue jerseys as well. Again, it would be a one-off. And I agree with what you're saying. Just get better gold pants, and I think that takes care of a lot of things. I think it's, they went with the all whites last year. The fact that they lost to Clemson wearing them, it does make me wonder if you'll ever see that look again. But, I thought it was a nice look as well, going with the all whites in that, like something that you wouldn't mind seeing every now and then. But I just can't see them getting away from their traditional gold. But I agree with what you're saying. Like, make it actual gold. Get it more gold and not this kind of yellowish mustard color.
Yeah, it's like a dark maize. Like it looks interesting.
Yeah.
It's like the color of the brim of my hat, honestly.
Yeah, you're right. It is. Joe is team all gold. He brought this up, I think, in the mailbag the other day. What do you think of all gold?
So I think Notre Dame went all gold once in a blue gold game in like 2001, I want to say. And don't quote me on that because in 2001, I was not old enough to watch it and remember. I think I just remember reading that they did. But
that sounds, I would have been around. Like, I do remember. That's been so long ago. I do remember
let me look.
A gold jersey at some point, and it would have been the blue gold game because it obviously hasn't happened in a real game. Irish English says pass on the all gold. I agree with that. I am not in on the all gold look. The only way I would be in on that would obviously be like a Shamrock Series game or something like that.
I would do the all gold if it wasn't this. Like sure. I would do the all gold if it was like the 2006 gold pants, but not the no.
Yeah. I'm not down with it. Sorry, Joe. I haven't changed since the other day. MB, do we think Tyler Evans will come back next year? Has he really shown enough over his career to be any kind of high draft pick?
Well, I think Mitchell Evans is out of eligibility. So I don't think he has the option to come back. I think this is his last year of eligibility.
I think you're right. Let me double check that real quick.
So whether we want him to or not, I don't think he has the ability to. So because I know he's had injuries, but none that have made him miss enough to where he can like medically redshirt. So I looked at their roster and it said that he's a senior. So I don't think he has the eligibility to come back.
Played in 13 games as a freshman, 13 games as a sophomore, 8 games obviously last year,
and he's played in every game so far.
And he's played in every game so far this year.
Yeah, so he's out.
Out. Yep, no choice. Which stinks for him because just where he is, I don't think he's going to be a high draft pick. I think he'll still be drafted, and NFL teams can look at what he did last year and know that there's a lot of upside. The big thing for him will just be continuing to get healthy, and get that knee stronger, and then have a good combine, and that kind of thing in February when it rolls around, assuming he gets invited to the combine. Hopefully he does. If not, he'll have to have, good pro day showing. I feel, again, like I feel like no matter where he gets drafted, he'll end up on an NFL roster for several years and have a chance to, continue to show himself, improve himself.
Yeah.
Well, as of now, we're out of questions. So if you have any questions that you were eagerly anticipating throwing in the mailbag today, go ahead and throw them in. Where are you watching the game from tomorrow, Trevor?
I'll be at home. So we finally have everything settled in the new apartment. Like we've been moved out of the old one, but now we have furniture and everything all in here. So yeah, hopefully it'll just be an uneventful Saturday sitting on my couch watching the game. So
someone, I don't know who Irish Breakdown this is, because so many of us have access to the Irish Breakdown login, but someone from the Irish Breakdown account just said, will Sean be done in time for the pregame show? Answer, yes. Yes, I will. Masked person. Nick throwing a late one in. Never been to a road Notre Dame / neutral site. Is there typically good merch? My guess is no, because this is still, even though it's on a neutral site, it's still considered Georgia Tech's home game. Like this isn't going to be like it's not Shamrock Series or anything like that, where it's technically on the road, but Notre Dame's home game. This is still technically Georgia Tech's home game, even though they're playing it in Mercedes-Benz instead of Bobby Dodd.
Yeah, I'm not going to be a good answer for this one. The only road Notre Dame football game I've been to was the 2022 Ohio State game, and there was no Notre Dame merchandise within 100 miles of that campus.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Vince cops to it. It was our own D'Addario. Joe, Auburn director of scouting, not sure the actual title, said in an interview, the reason for their great recruiting is the relationship they formed, not NIL. Deuce retweeted and agreed. Yeah, I would call BS on that. That's Joe's question. I would call total BS on that. Do you have anything?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's just the coach speak. It's the politically correct answer. There's a 0% chance their director of recruiting was going to come out and be like, yeah, we just threw a bag at him and he came here. So like, there's no way. So, I mean, I bet it is the relationship, but
the relationship of the money. Yeah. Look, Deuce sought them out, so whatever direction, you want to believe in any of that. Okay. That's fine.
Yeah.
Dude sought him out, shopped himself around and got himself. Now, that's not that there's necessarily more money than he was going to get here, but he put himself in a situation where he could, get whatever NIL that he's going to get and have a chance to play right away. He wasn't going to have a chance to play right away at Notre Dame. He was going to have to sit for a couple of years, most likely.
Yeah. I mean, look, end of the day, like Deuce is gone. He's no longer a recruit for Notre Dame. Wish him the best at Auburn, but Notre Dame got a really good guy in Blake Hebert, and I'm excited for him to get here. So I'm glad we can finally put the 2025 quarterback class discussions to rest for now until signing day.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Trevor, I enjoyed it. Enjoyed jumping on with you here this afternoon. Enjoyed Jason Rose slipping one past the goalie. Which injury that's happened this season has a chance of catching up with Notre Dame the rest of the season?
Ben Morrison's.
Yeah.
The ceiling of this season is not as high without Ben Morrison. And at the rate that Notre Dame is going, knock on wood here, but at the rate that Notre Dame is going, there's going to be another injury, whether it be on offense or defense, unfortunately. And that's just how college football goes. But Ben Morrison's, the detriment to that cornerback room is going to be huge, because Christian Gray went from being like the complimentary piece and like the, He's that young guy that's about to come onto the scene. And now it's like, hey, so you're now the guy. And for Leonard Moore, it's like, hey, we know you're a true freshman. I know you're 18, 19 years old, but now it's time to go. Like it's time to start putting on. So Ben Morrison's will for sure. And that's no knock on Leonard Moore or Christian Gray. It's just they are now put into a role that they were not expected to be in on August 31st.
Yep.
Right. But we've seen a lot of flashes from Christian Gray. And like, I am happy that this is the situation, right? I am happy that it is, okay, well, we have a guy who Ben Morrison claimed is going to be the next him, if not
better. I mean, for the future, it's great.
Right.
You just hope that for right now, it's great. And, as you were saying, I have zero, reason, not to believe in the skill and that Leonard Moore will get the job done. I do, but my concern is just the depth and how that plays out over the course of minimum of 6 games. Then you get a break, obviously, whether it's a bowl game or a playoff game or whatever, before game number 13. But that's a long time when you look at how things have gone so far.
Yep, I agree.
So does the absence of Haynes King, Salty wants to know, change anything in our game predictions?
My game prediction before I knew Haynes King was out was 38-14 Notre Dame. I could see this now being a 38-10 type game. Georgia Tech is a really good red zone offense. I think they have 21 red zone touchdowns on the season. So
you got to get to the red zone first.
Yeah, I agree. So I think their ability to get into the red zone is going to be tougher without Haynes King. And I think if they do reach the end zone, or if they do reach the red zone, I don't think it's going to be I don't think it's going to be as easy to get there, right? Like to get into the end zone without Haynes King. He adds a dynamic piece to that offense.
Yeah, it's funny that your prediction was 38-14. Mine is 38-13. So we are 1 point off, and obviously probably a touchdown and a couple of field goals there. I feel like, again, Georgia Tech's offense better overall. The offensive line is better overall. The running back is much more dynamic than what Stanford had. But I just feel like with a younger, less experienced quarterback, I think he's going to have a really hard time consistently completing passes. I think that's going to be an issue for him, lack of depth in Notre Dame's secondary or not. So I might even tack on a touchdown for Notre Dame just because I feel like the defense, might specifically be able to give them one in all of that. So I might even say like 45-10, somewhere around there.
Yeah, I agree.
Do you have any opinion on the manner of Jared Curtis's decommitment?
I don't know how he went about the decommitment. I read about it. He's one of Georgia's quarterbacks for the class of, I think, 2020. Is it 26? It might be 26. I'm not sure. But like just based on all the off-field issues that Georgia is having and how it's starting to translate to some of the product that they put on the field, I could see it. But Salty, I don't know the manner of how we did it. So if you can throw it in the chat and let us know. But that's something that I'm not too sure of.
Yeah, Gordy not saying defense needs to remove all doubt. No doubt about that. P-Dub says Notre Dame can't take it for granted. And Al Golden and Marcus Freeman and Notre Dame won't. Like they've been preparing for the potential of either quarterback all week, and now they'll see the other one. Raymond says they can still run the ball well. They do, but Haynes King is a part of that. And now Zack Pyron will also be a part of that. But this is, Notre Dame is going to load up and make Zack Pyron have to throw the ball. Like that's going to be, I would like shove all of my money, all of my chips to the middle of the table on that. They're going to make Zack Pyron have to throw the football. And the presence of Gabe Rubio helps that in the middle of the defensive line as well. Again, Jamal Haynes is a really good running back. But when you have that less experienced quarterback who's going to be more prone to mistakes, and the fact that he can't throw the ball as well, I just think that it potentially adds up for a long day, because you can, like, that just helps you make Georgia Tech that much more one-dimensional. The fact that you have that young, inexperienced quarterback.
Yeah.
Salty is desperate. He is lobbing softballs at us to keep us going for a little bit longer. Will Indiana, hosting the game, beat Nebraska? I'm still saying no. I've got Nebraska winning this game.
Yeah, I have Nebraska winning.
Should a football game start at 11 a.m. as the Indiana game will? Well, you've obviously never watched the Big 10 or the Big 12, I was going to say, very much, because their games routinely start at 11 a.m. local time all the time with those noon Eastern time kickoffs. My answer would be no. I do think that's a little bit earlier, especially if you're a tailgater. Like, where's the fun in that, an 11 a.m. game? But happens all the time. I'm double checking. I'm making sure that we haven't slided anybody. Clay, what is the higher value to a recruit? A good playoff environment or win the first round?
I think it's subjective. I think it depends on what that recruit is looking for specifically. I mean, if it were me, I'm always going to value a win. That's just me. So, I mean, I get, like, are you talking like a good playoff environment as in, like, if Notre Dame were to host a playoff game, like, it's a crazy place to play? But I mean, I'm always going to err on the side of a win.
Yeah, I would go with that as well. I think that, but I don't think that wins or losses necessarily impact recruiting decisions very often. I think, the bigger thing is kind of the stuff, that Auburn is claiming is the relationship and then just the experience that you give these guys when they come in. I think that tends to outweigh everything. Someone was asking for an upset this weekend, and I'm kind of going through these top 25 games, and there's just nothing, that's really popping out at me. Like, unless
Louisville over Miami would be an interesting.
That's one. Yeah.
That's going to be an interesting game. I'm trying to think of the other.
I still have Miami winning, even though they've squeaked by these last couple of games. Does make it interesting. Noon road game at Louisville. I think that is one to keep an eye on, but I did pick Miami to win. Any others that you can see?
Off the top of my head, no. Like, I mean, it depends on what you want to value, like an upset. You know what I mean? Because it's like, technically Alabama is the favorite going into Tennessee, but based on how both teams have played so far this year, I don't know if Tennessee won, if that'd be considered like as ruckus of an upset as Louisville over Miami would be. That LSU Arkansas is another good one. I just saw that put in the chat.
I'm sitting there. You keep sneaking these questions in here that I didn't realize were in there. Salty wants to know, is Tennessee, Georgia the best game this weekend? I'd say, or Tennessee, it's Texas,
Texas,
Georgia.
Yeah.
Tennessee, Alabama. So, but I would say Texas, Georgia, yes.
Yeah, I would too.
Let me see. I think that there's still... Trevor and Sean, are you aware that Brian takes 4 hours to answer the same number of questions you answered today? I would say no comment.
Brian's a great boss. I love what I get to do with him on Friday.
That's right. That's why I would say no comment.
I will say, I do think we do have more questions to, like, we get there. I go through and I star a lot of questions as the show goes on. And I know Brian does the same. I remember before a show even started one time, we had like 37 starred comments.
Wow.
Yeah.
One more from Salty here. Your favorite tidbit involving the Four Horsemen? Can you name them off the cuff? You're a young pup. Can you name the Four Horsemen? Trevor.
I can. Harry Staldrayer, Jim Crowley, Elmer Layden, and Don Miller.
Boom. Nailed it.
So
impressive.
Thank you. Thank
Very
you. I don't know what kind of Notre Dame fan, diehard Notre Dame fan I would be if I didn't know their names. But the one that I always forget is Don Miller.
Me too.
That's
too.
That's the one
and it's
that
the most common name. I think that's why.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we used to many years ago. This would have been, I think, around the time when Vince and I were doing radio back at a previous radio station here in town. We were doing the Notre Dame football pregame show. We had do you know who Harry Callis is by any chance?
I do not.
Former longtime voice of the Philadelphia Phillies on the radio, and also did like a lot of the NFL films. He was like the second guy to do the NFL films stuff, but he had one of these, deep kind of voices. And
okay,
we had him record the, the whole thing, like outlined against a blue-gray October sky, the four horsemen rode again. He read the whole thing for us in Harry Callis' voice, and you could literally, we were connected. It was like pre, any of the kind of connections that we're using, obviously, right now. So they have it. It's called like an ISDN line.
Okay.
But we were sitting in a room, and he was sitting in his little, studio in his house doing it, and we were talking back and forth, and you could literally, like outlined against a blue-gray October sky. The four horsemen rode again. It was very very fun. But then we used that at the, like as the intro to our pregame show. And I wish I still had that recording, because like he's got just one of those voices that is so classic. A new program director, and they decided, that it was like too much of an old school sound, and they tried to jazz up the open, using like top 40 crap type music and stuff like that. Yeah. It was very, very disappointing when Harry Callis went away from our show. Salty wants to know, what is your advice for Vince on Dylan's senior night game and afterwards? Stay stoic, my friend. Stay stoic. No, just, look around and enjoy it as much as possible. I still remember Jesse's senior night, strolling out there, and going through the whole thing. And, like that high school experience is so cool. And it's just, Vince already knows this, and I'm sure you know it very well also, Trevor. Like those 4 years just go by in the blink of an eye. It's amazing how quickly they go by. So just soak it up as much as possible. That's all I'd say. Soak it up.
Yeah.
Try to do, because I know Vince, has like administrative duties and things like that. I don't know how they translate to home games, but try to keep all that to a minimum so you can actually focus on the most important things, soaking up your son's last home game.
Yeah.
That's what I would say.
Yeah, I agree. Be present in the moment. There's a lot of moving pieces on Friday Night Lights, and it's weird because on senior night it's such an intimate moment that you have like with your family, but then there's like a football game that still has to come afterwards. So I would just soak in the moment, be present, would be my advice. I don't have a kid, so
No, you don't.
But
especially not high school age. That would be very weird if you did.
No, I think that's impossible, but that'd be my advice.
That's right. Salty wants to know if I cheer for Army against Navy. I don't know why I wouldn't, considering I was in the Army. USMA 87, it's like right there. It's like, come on. It's funny. I still remember when I was it's called DLI for short, because everything in the military is some kind of acronym, Defense Language Institute. But basically all four branches of the service had, like different buildings on the same, thing. But it was early December, and, the Navy had their own, building, and outside it, they had this huge anchor that they had outside. And every year when the Army-Navy game came up, someone I had no part in it, but the tradition was that, people from the Army would paint the Navy anchor in different colors. So it's been painted and repainted plenty of times. So it was always a good time.
That's interesting.
Yes. All right. Let me make sure there's not one more thing. Okay, we got the 4 horsemen.
Yeah, there's a couple that I didn't star yet. So I can
do you have a couple more?
Yeah, I'll throw them up here. I got you. Let me read some off to you. Let's flip roles here for a quick second. We got another one from Salty Virginia Peanuts. Is Stonebreaker the best name for a linebacker ever?
I don't know how it couldn't be. Like, literally, it's Stonebreaker, and when you think of a linebacker hitting, like I think of breaking backs. So
yeah, I think that name's got to be up there. As much as I'm not an Ohio State fan, but they've had 2 linebackers recently. They've had Tough Borland and Steel Chambers.
Good one. Was Steel Chambers a real one? Was that real?
Yeah. No, he played against.
Oh, I'm thinking of Steel from the Rudy movie. That's what I'm thinking of. Not Steel Chambers.
But yeah, Steel Chambers. That one that's a cool name.
Takeo Spikes. Yeah, that was a good one.
Yeah. I honestly
Major Booty. I don't think he wasn't a linebacker though, was he? Wasn't Major Booty a quarterback?
Yeah, I think it's General Booty.
But still a really good name, like a good sports name for sure.
We have another one from Carrie Later. Okay, last question from me. Is it a bad thing that we are playing in so many professional stadiums this year? Shows how big a footprint Notre Dame has, but definitely has a different feel.
Yeah, I don't think it's a bad thing at all, because like if you look at Notre Dame's game notes, like they make note of the fact that Notre Dame, this is going to be the 13th NFL stadium that Notre Dame has played in since 2016, and no other FBS school can make that claim. Like this is, not that it's at the top of the list of recruiting pitches, but it's definitely, something that comes up is like, you're not just going to have a chance to play in one of the most tradition-rich environments in the country when you play your home games at Notre Dame Stadium. You're also going to have a chance to go play a game in Ireland every now and then. And you're going to have a chance, like probably at least twice, if not 3 times in your career, you're going to play in an NFL stadium someplace. And no other, what is it, 2 years from now, they're going to go to Lambeau and they're going to get to play up at Lambeau Field. There aren't many college programs who can make that claim to playing in as many NFL stadiums as Notre Dame. So I think it's nothing but a good thing.
Yeah, I agree. It's one of the selling points about coming to Notre Dame, right? It's you hear that slogan all the time. It's like, this is why you come to Notre Dame. It's like, well, if you have aspirations to make it to the NFL, Notre Dame's going to play in an NFL stadium before you actually get to the NFL. So,
yep. Major Harris was a cool name, P-Dub. I always liked that name as well, right up until he played against Notre Dame. DK, Jesse Stiers, good name for a linebacker. Just ask him. He'll tell you. Pretty sure General's middle name is Maximus.
Max Booty is crazy.
Yes. Jeff wants to know food and beverage plans for tomorrow. I have not outlined what tomorrow is. I'm actually going to have the whole house to myself tomorrow, because speaking of Jesse, he lives in Cleveland, and they've got they're getting married next October, but his fiance is doing the wedding dress, go to the shop, and so it's like my wife, my daughter, and her mom, I think stepmom, grandma, all these, they're all converging in Cleveland to go do the wedding dress thing. So I'm going to have the house to myself tomorrow. So I don't know what I'm going to be doing.
Party
going to have to figure that out.
Party at Sean's.
Father David says long engagement. Money is part of the issue. They need the the year, two different things. One, to get the venue that they want. Like these venues, man, they go fast. I don't know like how much of that you experienced, Trevor, but that's what they found out is the venues go fast. And when you're trying to fit it within a budget, your venues become even more, like the places that you can go and then, like specific to what you're looking for in a venue. And
oh yeah,
because so many of these places are all inclusive now, like you can't just show up and book a wedding. You've also got to buy their food. If you want a bar, you've got to buy their boot, all that different stuff. So between all of that and they're saving up over the course of the next year to pay for it as well. So that's part of those are the big factors in why they're doing it a year out.
Oh, I get it. Oh, hey, I was engaged for 4 years. So
were you really?
Sure was.
That was probably your fault though, right?
Always is. Come on. Come on.
Say yes to the dress. That's right. That's actually how I explained it to my daughter, when because she watches that yes to the dress thing. So I had to this is what you're going to say yes to the dress, this whole thing. All right. Well, I think that's going to do it. We're going to go ahead and wrap it up. Vince and I are hitting record on IB Countdown to Kickoff in about an hour from now. And so been pretty fortunate. I'll knock on wood, but you can, if everything goes well, you should be able to find it on YouTube a little after 6, something like that, by the time we get it all primed up and put up and ready to go. So, one more from Salty. Favorite guilty pleasure. Mine, I am probably ashamed to say, is 90 Day Fiancé. I don't know if you've ever seen that, Trevor.
That show's wild.
It is. And I've been kind of off on it a little bit because of some of the people. Like they've really gone to the well, like bringing people back for multiple seasons and stuff like that. And I'm kind of sick of some of them. But that is the one. My wife and daughter started watching it on Sundays, and that is my guilty pleasure, is the 90 Day Fiancé.
Yeah, I'll give my answer and then I'll wrap it up. So I mean, we got
probably safe way to go, right?
Yeah. So my guilty pleasure, I don't know if you guys have seen it on Netflix, but Love is Blind is also a crazy TV show. I've
heard of it, but I've never seen it.
That show is nuts. People are getting engaged before they see what people look like. Now, I will say, at the end of the show, you're supposed to say, is love truly blind? But then the caveat is everybody looks stunning on both sides. So it's
sure.
I think it'd be interesting because there's always, I'm a supermodel. Like, I think it'd be funny if then, like, when the curtain rises, it's like a guy that looks like me and then like a supermodel. And then it's like, is love truly blind? I guess we'll find out. But
I see.
But yeah, gosh, we are just coming off the rails a little bit here. Okay. So
I think you're right.
All right, guys. Well, Friday mailbag. Good.
We are good. Appreciate you being here. Appreciate all the questions today. Hit that like button if you would. Thank you very much, Connor. Thank you very much, Irish English, for the reminder to hit the like button. Do it before you leave. Appreciate you, putting up here on Friday. I promise Brian will be back next week because he is en route to Atlanta this afternoon. IB Countdown to Kickoff coming up later tonight on the old platform. And of course, the post-game show. You'll be back on the post-game show tomorrow. Is that right?
Back on the post-game show after the game tomorrow. We'll be on there. Hit the subscribe button. Hit the notification bell. Leave us a 5-star review. And as always, go to boards@irishbreakdown.com for all the exclusive content.
Trevor is here. He remembers all those important things to say. Have a great weekend. Enjoy the game. We'll talk to you next week.
Go Irish.